Hi, my name is Alice and I'm the Project Manager on the NDS Traineeship Program that is currently underway in Tasmania. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Traineeships have been significantly underutilised in the disability sector in recent years. NDS has been funded to deliver 2 projects across the state by Skills Tasmania. And this is through the Growing Apprenticeships and Traineeships Industry and Regionally Led Solutions Program, which is also referred to as the GATORS program. The aim of the GATORS program is to strengthen Tasmania's workforce by increasing the number of new apprentices and trainees employed, identify existing industry and/or regional barriers that limit the employment of apprentices and trainees, and trial targeted solutions to resolve those barriers, and support collaborative relationships between industry, employers, community organisations and training organisations. NDS was funded to deliver 2 different projects. One is aimed at upskilling the disability sector with traineeships, and the other is aimed at creating pathways into the disability sector through traineeships. I will cover the project to upskill the disability sector first. So keeping in mind the aim of the GATORS program includes identifying barriers that limit the employment of trainees and trialling targeted solutions to resolve these barriers. In our application for funding, the identified barriers to the employment of trainees for employees that are already in the disability sector included a lack of confidence in traineeship pathways by employers. During our engagement with the sector, it had become clear that there was a lack of confidence and understanding of the traineeship pathway and of the supports available in the disability sector. Another barrier was the lack of understanding of the benefits and programs from the employee's perspective. There were employees with little confidence around formal education and training, as well as a lack of awareness of the traineeship pathway and supports available. A lack of tools and skills to identify the right employees for a traineeship. So employers had also expressed that they have difficulty identifying the right employees to transition from casual employment into a traineeship. Lack of organisational capacity to provide adequate support, mentorship and supervision to trainees. This barrier was faced by most employers that don't currently utilise traineeships. And the final barrier we identified was the financial implications of incorporating the traineeship model into the business recruitment methods. In line with the GATORS program, we developed target outcomes and outputs as solutions to overcome these barriers, which I'll detail shortly. So we were successful in our application and the project began in December 2019 and runs for 2 years. The targeted traineeships are the Certificate 3 in Individual Support and the Certificate 4 in Disability. The target number of traineeships is a minimum of 96 across the state. When we initially planned the project, this number was 60, but following a series of employer workshops across the state in February and subsequent engagements, it became clear that 60 would not meet the demand for the existing worker pathway of this project. We structured the project to be delivered in 2 rounds and opened expression of interest for round 1 in March. Employers submitted expression of interest outlining how many trainee places they would like to commence in round 1. 13 organisations requested places, with the number of places requested for round 1 exceeding 150. We worked with the RTO we have engaged for the project and determined we could offer 57 places for round 1, and these were assigned in April. In order to determine how many places we could assign to organisations, we asked them to provide their organisational headcount, the number of support workers they have, the number of support workers they have without a minimum relevant Certificate 3 qualification, and their current number of trainees. Another target outcome is that the number of traineeships grow as a traineeship model is sustainably embedded into the business structure of employers in the disability sector across the state. To achieve these target outcomes, we developed the following outputs. Information sessions delivered to employers across the North, Northwest and South. So as I mentioned, we delivered employer workshops in February. These were held in these 3 regions and involved the employers, RTO, apprenticeship network providers, the Department of Education, who came along and spoke about school-based traineeship opportunities, and a consultant assisting with the screening resources for the project that I'll discuss shortly. Regular employer engagement is another output. So in order to ensure that the traineeship model is sustainably embedded into the business structure of organisations, we will maintain regular employer engagement to address any problems that might arise. The impact of COVID-19 has meant that some employers were concerned about meeting the minimum hours requirement for their trainees. Through engaging with the employers, NDS became aware of this concern and negotiated an agreement with the state government to reduce the minimum hours for trainees going through the program until business and the hours offered to employees are able to stabilise. Information sessions delivered to current employees and the development of resources are 2 other outputs. So another important aspect of the program is ensuring that employees understand the traineeship pathway and the opportunity that it presents. Information sessions were planned to be delivered at the end of March, but were cancelled due to COVID. Information has been conveyed through employers and resources will be delivered to current employees that will be interested in a qualification. Development of screening resources for employers. So NDS has also engaged a consultant to assist with the development of screening resources for employers to assist in identifying which employees would be appropriate to invest in for a traineeship. This is still underway, so employers were informed that they were able to either commence employees that they have already identified as someone they'd like to offer a traineeship to, or they can wait for the resources to make their decision. Most employers expressed they had an initial cohort they could identify, but it will be useful for them to utilise beyond the initial commencements. Mentor and supervisor training. So one of the main barriers that was identified in our engagement prior to submitting the application for funding was the lack of organisational capacity to provide adequate support, mentorship and supervision to trainees. To assist with this concern, we incorporated mentor and/or supervisor training into the program. So for every 3 traineeships an organisation enters into, the project will fund training up to the value of $1,000 for a supervisor or team leader of the employer's choice. So an early adopter incentive for employers was also included. This was because one of the barriers raised was that employers were reluctant to invest in traineeships due to the financial implications of incorporating the traineeship model into business models, including the implications of converting employees from casual to part-time. To assist with alleviating this, we included the early adopter incentive in the program, which involved an $1,000 incentive to be paid per trainee to employers. With the increase in numbers in the program, this has been reduced to $500. We consulted the employers on the reduction and there were no objections. Employers have until the 1st of December this year to commence trainees that they have been assigned. We have had over 20 of the 57 trainee applications received since the end of March, which we're really pleased with, especially with the impact of COVID-19. We will continue to monitor the impact of COVID and make any adaptations that we need to. The second project we were funded for is aimed at developing pathways into the disability sector through traineeships. In our application for funding for this pathway, we identified barriers for recruiting trainees into the disability sector. Some of these barriers were shared with the current worker pathway, including the lack of confidence and understanding of the traineeship pathway and supports available in the disability sector, the lack of organisational capacity to provide adequate support, mentorship and supervision to trainees, and the financial implications of incorporating the traineeship model into the business recruitment methods. Through engagement with the sector, there were 2 barriers that were identified that were considered unique to the new recruit pathway. These included the inability to identify the right cohort for traineeships and attract appropriate recruits, and recruits who are not work ready or are not the right fit for the sector. This pathway also commenced in December 2019 and runs for 2 years. And the targeted traineeships are the Certificate 3 in Individual Support and the Certificate 4 in Disability. The target number of traineeships for this pathway is a minimum of 60 across the state. We initially structured the project to be delivered in 2 rounds, with the expression of interest from employers scheduled to open in June 2020. Dependent on the impact of COVID-19 on the first round for this pathway, we may need to adjust the schedule and conduct 3 rounds. This pathway also has the target outcome that the number of traineeships grow as the traineeship model is sustainably embedded into the business structure of employers across the state. To achieve these target outcomes, we developed the following outputs. Information sessions delivered to employers across the North, Northwest and South. So during the employer workshops in February, we also engaged with employers regarding the new recruit pathway. Regular employer engagement is another output for this project. Information sessions delivered to potential new recruits and development of resources. So another important aspect of the program is ensuring that employers and potential recruits understand the traineeship pathway and the opportunity that it presents. Information sessions were planned to be delivered to potential new recruits, but will be adapted to an online resource. Development of screening resources for employers. So to address the barrier identified that it can be difficult to identify the right fit for the sector, we've engaged a consultant to assist develop screening resources for employers. The resources have been informed through the employer workshops and subsequent engagements. When COVID-19 hit, this meant that these resources would need to be adapted to support an online recruitment method, which round 1 is now going to be. The resources are in the final stages of development, with the next step of the process being that employers will be given the opportunity to give feedback on any necessary amendments. Mentor or supervisor training is also in this pathway. So again, for every 3 traineeships an organisation enters into, the project will fund training up to the value of $1,000 for a supervisor or team leader of the employer's choice. The final output is a pre-traineeship readiness course that is developed and delivered in each region. This is to address the barrier that was identified that new recruits were not always job ready. To address this barrier, we're providing pre-traineeship readiness course. We engage with employers during the employer workshops to understand what they would like included in this course. COVID has impacted this, and we're currently assessing what we can provide with the current restrictions in place for round 1. Thank you for listening to learn about the NDS Traineeship Program. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.